music, and that was my instrument, was sax. I have a Selmer Mark 6 tenor sax, and if you know what that means, eat your heart out. And I got it for $230 at the Selmer factory. This thing has the same fingering as a saxophone, so for me, this is a natural user interface. But on the other hand, doesn't sound like a saxophone. So you sort of say, well, that's not natural to have a flute sound come out of a saxophone. But if you think about it, that's not quite true, because it's natural for me because this is what I play. I don't play flute. Actually, I do a little bit, but not very well. But on the other hand, what I really don't play, I don't play saxophone or guitar. The point is, no. Now you understand why I left the music industry. Okay, the deal is this, that this, if you know how to play, the better you play, the better that interface is. But it's useless for doing your income tax. And that's the point. It doesn't have schizovigia. It doesn't have schizoapplicationa. It does what it does, and it does it really well. And the whole thing about the design is it reflects the skill of the user, the hours and hours and hours of what the player should have invested practicing. Now, when we talk about natural and this natural user interface, it's really interesting because you sort of say, well, what the heck does natural mean? And that's actually a harder question than it seems at the beginning. So this is a picture of my oldest son, Adam, and as a baby. And you sit there and say, well, okay, let's start at the beginning. And what's natural? Well, they come out of the womb, and you can pee, you can poop, you can scream, you can kind of perceive, you can giggle a little bit and gurgle, and you can drink. And that's about it. Now, if that's all you have to work with, what you're born with, at that level, we're going to be hard-pressed to build user interfaces. I mean, if it's a natural UI, it has to conform to that, what you're born with. You know, we've already, we're way out of that place. But there's one other thing that's really natural. And it's not a sense or motor action. Rather, it's the ability to acquire skill. It's the innate compulsion to acquire skill as we live in a world. And intelligence is actually the whole, by Piaget's definition, is this whole notion of the acquisition of skill and how to adapt and assimilate to a changing environment as you develop. And so when we talk about natural user interface, it basically says it is interfaces that respect the skills that have been acquired by the user. So I want to illustrate this a little bit by using this metaphor of a mirror. And the notion is this, is that if I'm looking at any design of any application, and I want to get a sense of what is the quality, how would I evaluate this application, this device? I have a really simple litmus test, and it's basically to say, pretend the technology application is a mirror. How well does it reflect me, the intended user, the target user? And you sort of say, well, that's kind of a too wishy-washy, artsy-fartsy way to say things. So let's get a little bit more specific and tie it to what I've said so far. So let's come back to this notion about skill. So the first thing is that how well does it reflect my 4 basic skills? So first of all, how does it reflect my motor sensory skills? So on the one hand, you look and you see you're totally distorted if it's a bad design, and because what your motor sensory skills is how I see, how I touch, how I move, right? How I sound, how I hear. And then it comes back in as we improve the design so that things start to reflect that I have 2 hands, I have 10 fingers, or 4 fingers in each hand and a thumb, that I have a voice, I have ears, I have legs. I had this old story that if you found a PC 2,000 years in the future and all trace of humankind had been lost, what would a good physical anthropologist infer about human beings today? And they'd say you have no legs, you have no mouth, you have an eye with can do fully saturated colors, you have an ear that can do 200 hertz bandwidth and take clicks, and you have 1 claw with about 80 fingers. And that would be as reasonable based on the data as it is wrong. And the question is, how well does it reflect? Now, that's just the motor sensory part of us, which is visible. So let's come back to the next stage and say, how well does the system reflect my cognitive skills? How I think, how I learn, how I problem solve, how I remember. And we start off in this world that things are totally distorted. And then gradually, we start to get systems where the fidelity increases, and it starts to be an accurate reflection of me. So now we got 2 out of 4. And then we start to see this other part. Well, how well does the system reflect my social skills? Things like proximity, where I am. So, for example, this says something, about me being shy or something, and not. But things about proximity, when it's appropriate to speak, what I'm allowed to say. Why you all know that I'm a speaker and you're not, because I'm here by location. Those are all our social skills. You bring those in. Bring those to high fidelity. It's another way to think about social computing or social networking. It's got to do with not about the technology, but how do people function? What are their existing skills? What new skills could we bring about? And finally, there's this slightly less intangible one, but emotional skills. How well does the system reflect? What's appropriate in terms of emotional response? You know, if I came out hysterical and screaming, although some of you might say I am hysterical, but the thing is that how does it reflect that? What's appropriate? And a game is different than perhaps an accounting package of what you would want to do in terms of the emotional curve that you want to come during the application. But in some sense, this is basic fundamentals, but it brings back to the notion that the most important technology is not the hardware, not the software, it's the wetware, it's the human being. And the neatest thing about it is while all the physical technologies and hardware and software are changing under us all the time, that's okay because they're the secondary technologies. The primary one is actually pretty consistent. And so the time invested to understand that part, the 4 skills, is the important part, and it will last for your whole career, and then you can be as cavalier as possible to change and bring the most appropriate technologies that are available at the time. It's a good way to think about things. Now, if we talk about these skills, I want to give you a few examples about how important this is. So I put up this image, somebody playing air guitar. Well, I sort of let the cat out of the bag. Okay, I told you the instrument, but is this person playing flamenco or classical guitar or Renaissance guitar, or is he playing, heavy metal? You know exactly by the size of the gesture that this is not J.S. Bach, right? And then if you contrast it with this, and you look at the nature of the gesture here, and it's people listen to Vivaldi or something like that, or harpsichord music, they're going to be like this. This is the kind of action, right? And if you're doing that in a bar where, Iron Maiden is playing, you're probably going to get punched out. And because it's inappropriate. And we're just talking about listening to music and what's the gesture with music. And so it's not about what's the appropriate gesture for music. What's the appropriate gesture for music of this particular idiom, in this particular context, for this particular person, in this particular place and point in time. And so we have to go way beyond in terms of the granularity. And so here's another example. Is that, okay, we've got the right gesture. It's all about games. And so we have a person coming out with Natal, playing a game. So watch what happens here. It's fantastic. So what if you play exactly the same game on an airplane? So this is my son again, so we showed this picture. So, right, it's not natural. The naturalness doesn't come from Natal, it comes from Natal in the right place. It's not about the technology. Simple things that reflect here in terms of, we've got buttoning shirts here. Why are women's shirts backwards and wrong? And they are. They're absolutely. This is not a matter of fact. They button. Because women, when buttons came out, buttons are really expensive. And the only women who could afford them didn't dress themselves. They had a dresser, so they were made for the convenience of the dresser, not of the wearer. Men dressed themselves. Women's are wrong if they're doing them up themselves. These are all things about human factors of fine levels of granularity about how things work. But Flaubert said here, le bon Dieu est dans le détail.